again, Trump is getting a lot of pressure both within the U.S. and internationally. With now, who is it? Spain, Italy said, well, they didn't mean it when they didn't let us, use one of their air bases. But other countries are sort of pushing back in Europe on the war, and there's, it's not playing well here in the U.S. in some of the polls. But at the same time, I don't see the regime change that the administration was looking to push for. I mean, I don't see, an uprising and the people taking over in a democratic society emerging from all of this. It just seems that whoever wants a ceasefire, whoever they're dealing with, still seems to hold reign over the country in a form or fashion. It's not all that different than what existed before, even though they may claim to give up some of their ideological goals. So,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it's very easy, right, to say, listen, we have an agreement. We've damaged their capability of doing this. I mean, this was essentially what happened a couple months ago, or 6 months ago. They're not going to be able to rebuild. And then by the time, it's not as though they're going to have a nuclear power and a nuclear warhead and fire it in the next year and a half. So it's going to be someone else's problem down the road, as long as he can sell the idea that this has put them way behind. So on the worst case scenario, it's an administration win will be painted that way. But I'm fascinated to see what happens in the next 2 weeks, because I think I mentioned I bought more of the market a couple days ago, thinking that 6 months after these types of things were usually much higher. So let's see how that. I was wrong the first couple days, and hopefully some peace will break out. But I mean, moving carrier groups makes me think that we haven't seen the end of this.
yeah,
I
it's
don't know what it
impossible.
means.
It's impossible to predict, and oil's still sitting at $100 a barrel. So, we'll see how this
So
plays out.
your companies will keep printing money. I don't
Yes.
know. Does the war, Jeff, get people to go out and buy expensive, questionably made furniture at Restoration Hardware?
Apparently
I-
not. You have a company that levered up on they went from making overpriced furniture in America to housing developments to European stores. That turned out to be not a great bet, and so now they're wildly overlevered. I worry that they're canaries in the coal mine, Restoration Hardware being a particularly fragile canary. This is a market where the best of consumer companies, you can argue that they've been sold out, they've been beaten down so much. But as we saw from Restoration and Nike, which is a much more respected company, at least going into the call last night, there's still plenty of room to the downside. They're all faced with basically the same problem, which is there is no answer to the question, what are you going to do about energy and how is this going to affect the consumer in a month, in 2 months? It's Restoration Hardware, which is always reliably bonkers. They released their quarter in video form last night. If you guys haven't seen it, it's worth going over to the Restoration Hardware investor relations page. They sort of had background music as though you were at a nice spa, and they showed a lot of kind of soft focus footage of their restaurant in Paris, which is wildly just overpriced and delayed. Quote from Albert Einstein talking about the work. As it turns out, Einstein had a lot of quotes, one of which is two things are infinite, the universe and human stupidity. He seemed to be referring to Restoration Hardware after that backed. At least that's how the market took it. Shares down 20%, really pushing on COVID lows at this point. And so you've taken a company that kind of tripled down on the luxury end of the market. Things are not going well. And this is a little bit of an outlier case. It's a company that's held on for a long time. They've done a lot of short squeezes. Nike's probably more concerning for a longer term consumer perspective. The question there is this just a boomer company whose time has passed and who has leaned for at least a decade too long into the Michael Jordan brand? They plan to address the World Cup by coming out with Jordan soccer gear. I'm not sure how Michael Jordan is associated with soccer. I'm not sure how that's going to sell in Europe. And, he's a cranky old golfer at this point. But, that stock is at 10-year lows, at least 10-year lows at this point, down some 15%. And again, these companies just don't have any answer. The turnaround there is taking a lot longer than expected. That's not particularly surprising for people who were paying attention to what's going on in the marketplace, but it also reflects that uphill battle for consumer companies right now.